right, so welcome in. If you're joining us online, welcome. We are in the last bit of Genesis. Very good. I reread the story, and I read some parts more intently than others, and I took some notes. So, if we look real fast, I got this slide, this, that, and I'm done. And that's it. I mean, that's it. That's all I got.
Want to do your final prayer right now?
Yeah, right. So I don't have a ton. Hey, because I didn't want to. I want to spend time debriefing Genesis as a whole as well, and we've done a little bit of that. But I wanted to put a ribbon on it, if possible, which of course we can't do because it's it's an old book, and we're not going to solve all the problems. We'll do our best. So, yeah. All right, so we've looked at the big hinge in Genesis. This is chapter 12, with chapters 1 through 11 being about God and the world, and 12 through 50 being about God and these patriarchs and matriarchs, these people in Abraham's family. We looked at creation, sin, early accounts, Noah, the flood, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Esau, Rebecca, Laban, all those people, and then Jacob wrestling and all those things. Jacob's name is changed to Israel, and Jacob has a kiddo. He's got a couple kiddos, and then a couple more kiddos, and he's got 12 kiddos. And he's got, I think, 4 wives, if I recall right, or 2 wives and 2 concubines. And then he's got a favorite son named Joseph. You're not supposed to have a favorite, but we all do. And so, his favorite is Joseph. And he gives him a coat, and the rest, as they say, is history, and that's really the tail end of Genesis, chapters 37 through 50. So if it's okay with you all, let's pause for a moment and we'll open up with a word of prayer, and then we'll hop in. So, Holy God, we pray that you'd be with us in our conversation. Be with us online, be with us here in this space, as we encounter you in the text, as we encounter this old story, and we wrestle with what it means for us today. Help the words, I don't know, shape and form us, or come alive, or challenge us, or bring comfort, or maybe all those things this evening. I pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. I'll pause for a moment to reflect on that. Isn't that interesting that a story can cause discomfort and comfort? It can challenge us, and it can be an old friend. It can be all those things. This is a really interesting book. So let's recap some themes so far that we've seen in Genesis. We've found a major theme of God. That's kind of good, important to know, important to say. This creation narrative. Early Genesis is sort of this posture of humanity in relationship to each other and God, this faithfulness and faithlessness, this God covenanting. And then there's this Abraham's family story, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I'm going to add Joseph on the end there, even though, right, the saying is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's like we always forget about Joseph, but he's 15 some odd chapters of the Bible, so that's a lot. Then there's this covenant, calling, and identity, marriage, family legacy, passing on a covenant and promise and fulfillment. Were there other themes for you, for those of you that read, that came out of the Joseph story? I found one theme in particular, and there's a handout that I gave on that, the theme of dreams. And then it was interesting how God uses the dreams or doesn't, or how Joseph interprets the dreams for the benefit or detriment of others, and then how there are other people who dreamt as well in Genesis that we'll go back to. And so it was a theme that I've not captured on here that I thought was really interesting, this theme of dreams. Did I miss any others in the Joseph narrative, you think, that you might add? It can be a minor theme or major theme, just curious what you think.
Well, it is interesting how his very first dreams, when he was a boy, comes true when he's an adult with his adult grown-up brothers.
Yeah. It takes a while for those dreams to come to fruition.
Whereas the other 2 dreams that he had, the cupbearer and the other guy, they came true right away.
Yeah. A timing of dreams. Okay. Dreams play an important role in certain parts of Scripture, not just Genesis. There are other other examples of dreams, like Daniel.
And Jacob has it's not exactly a dream. wrestling match.
Or the angels ascending and descending, this vision. We'll get into other dreams, and maybe I'll do that in a second, but we'll just keep going as best we can. I'll say this again to remind us that all this took place in this part of the land, in Canaan. These are real places. We can travel there as a group if we all want to. We'll book the trip, 2025, we'll go.
Okay.
And then we'll find, these places and be like, oh, this is Jacob's well.
Can I get a white cane?
Yeah. Right, and those of you who weren't here last week, I'll say it again, right? If you're trying to identify this quickly, this is the Mediterranean Sea, and then this is the Sea of Galilee. Always look for that piece of blue, the Dead Sea, and then the Jordan River between them. And then Egypt is over here, which is a prominent geographical area in our Joseph narrative. So I did this as best I could. This is Genesis 37 through 50 at a glance. It's a lot to cover, but all right, here we go. Joseph dreams of big things, and then he's kind of sold into slavery. Then there's this whole entire disturbing chapter about Judah and Tamar. And then there's a section about Potiphar's wife, who is like a wife of a Pharaoh's house, and accuses him of naughty things, right? And then there's dreams in prison, and then Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream, and then Joseph's brothers travel to Egypt, and then they travel to Egypt again, and then Benjamin is detained, and Judah kind of like says, no, don't worry, yeah. And Joseph's identity is revealed. Jacob's whole family travels to Egypt. Then there's a famine in Egypt. Then Jacob blesses the younger son. Then you have this whole entire chapter on Jacob's last words, and then Joseph reconciles with his brothers at the end. And then that's it.
And, I tell them don't fight on the way home.
And you guys better not bicker on the way back to Grandpa's house, right? Okay, I'm done. I want to talk about some themes and things that I encountered, and don't worry, I have notes, so I'm not just going to sit here and pontificate. But I'm curious from you, as those of you that read, those of you that encountered the Joseph story, what was new for you, or something that you didn't recognize, or something that jumped off the page, or something that you'd forgotten about and now remember? What was interesting? And if you didn't read, that's okay.
Well, I can't
We'll
read
go back
it
to this
without
page.
hearing all the songs from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor.
Nice.
Isn't it?
So as I'm reading, the songs are going through my head.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't see anything new, that I didn't remember,
Okay, nice.
but I did enjoy hearing it again, really did.
Yeah.
I don't remember the business about Potiphar's wife, apparently. That was not something that was
Oh, that's,
in
Yeah.
the stories of Joseph.
Yeah, that was not on the flannelgram in Vacation Bible School. Yeah, right?
There wasn't, no,
And I don't see that it has much bearing on the story, but whatever.
well, except that,
Yeah, let's sit with this for a second. Let's talk about Potiphar's wife. Go ahead. What do you think? What is the bearing on the story? What's the significance?
Well, just to show that he wouldn't give in to her.
All right, so maybe a demonstration of virtue. We could say that Joseph is faithful.
Which is one of the few.
He's one of the few, right? Yeah, and so much crap has happened to him, right? Really, he's betrayed by his own family, sold into slavery, sort of rises up the ranks.
Even to a pretty woman.
Yeah.
and he's thrown into prison for accosting this woman, and he hadn't. And there, when he's there, that's when he tells two more dreams, and one of them eventually gets him out of the dungeon.
Yes, right, and puts him back sort of in good graces.
Very good graces, he
Mm-hmm.
King what the dream stands for, and King puts him in charge of the whole country.
Yeah, and let's come back to Potiphar's wife in particular. How does Potiphar's wife? And these are off my notes. I'm not looking at my notes, so I'm just asking. I hear some sort of parallels between the hunt for a bride. You have like the child who's like needing to be matched up with somebody. So we got to find a bride for Isaac. Or, we could start with Abraham, right? He takes Sarah, right? So like they begin the story paired. Then they have their son Isaac, and then Abraham's like, I need to find this guy a wife. So they journey and they do that, right? And that's taken care of. And so on and so forth down the line. And here's Joseph, who, in my recollection of the story, he's not married yet, is he?
No.
No.
So you could have this sort of anticipatory question like, is this going to be his wife? Is this going to be, what's going to come of this? And of course, it's not really a story about that at all. I just think it's interesting that you have all the children of the patriarchs looking for a pairing, and this other woman comes into the story, and you could say, oh, is this a pairing story? No, it's not a pairing story at all. This is bad luck story, which I just think is interesting.
Well, it's interesting though that later on, when he comes out of prison, he's accepted like nothing happened.
Yeah.
So either Pharaoh figured out his wife was
Yep. On the sly.
not really great, or it's just part of the story, the first part, so that he would not submit to her. And then, forget about it, we're gonna talk about something else, but that was just part of the story. Because it was a story, I mean, again, not written down, it was told. So the first part, I think, was about he being a good person, wouldn't sleep with Pharaoh's wife, and then that's forgotten, and he comes back, and, all is forgiven and all that, which is strange.
Yeah.
Same Pharaoh, same wife around.
No, I don't think so. I think
Well-
they're different guys.
I think it's unclear, right? So Potiphar,
Potiphar is not Pharaoh.
so the text would say that is Potiphar's wife. And so the question is, well, who is that? Because if I remember correctly, like it never says, here's Potiphar. Like he's absent from the story.
Oh, that's right.
He's not really there. So some people have said it's just a high official's wife in Pharaoh's court.
Yeah.
Some people would say, and this is just different scholars would say that the eunuchs were high officials. And isn't this interesting? So this is the wife of a eunuch, which is why she pursues him sexually. Just an interesting, it doesn't say that.
Where did they get that stuff?
Which stuff?
That story, that it could have been a eunuch's wife and then.
Yeah,
mystery.
I think it's from the title of Potiphar and who, he was a high official.
Now, doesn't Potiphar's wife, doesn't she appeal to Potiphar that Joseph had been accosted her? That's what
I don't remember. There's a lot of chapters.
I know,
Yeah, she screams and cancel, I think.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Right, but doesn't she go to her husband and say that man, that Jewish man that you brought into this place?
Genesis 39, she called out to the members of her household. That's in verse 14. See, my husband has brought among us a Hebrew. Again, so it just says, or he. That's really what it says in Hebrew. It's what my footnote says. I'm in verse 14. He came in to lie with me, and I cried out in a loud voice. And she kept his garment until his master came home.
Yeah.
And she told him the same story. But he's still not named. There's not like saying so he's a high-ranking official.
Yeah, did you know that?
Yes, he's a captain of the guard.
He was one of Pharaoh's officials, captain of the guard.
But he's not named. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong, except for Potiphar. Potiphar.
Who was one of Pharaoh's officials, was the captain of the guard.
Yeah. I guess that's fair. What I'm trying to, suggest is, right, like, how common is the name? You know what I mean? Like, even if you try and go find Pilate, Pontius Pilate, there's a lot of, it's difficult to narrow down him in the archaeological record.
There's a lady at CBS, whose last name is Pearl.
Huh, interesting. So for him, he's a high-ranking official, and this is his wife. Where were we in the story?
Said that she yells and to her people, and when the master comes home, she tells him about it, and
And he gets imprisoned for it.
in prison.
And then, to your point, he comes out, and all seems to be forgiven.
But he ends up in Pharaoh's household instead of Potiphar's.
Potiphar.
Potiphar.
Yeah, you're fine.
You're right.
He left his clothes behind. Yeah, and my commentary agrees more with Pat, because it says that, when he came out, he was transferred to another part of Potiphar's house. That doesn't mean his imprisonment was a farce, but it suggests that Potiphar's anger may well have been directed toward his wife.
Maybe.
Ooh, I didn't read that.
So I'll just pause for a moment to identify a couple things, right? How far removed we are from the culture, day and age of this. That I don't think any of us with any amount of certainty could say, this is exactly what happens and here's why it happens. We just have sort of the story, and I think is a true story that happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying we are far removed in a way that we cannot say with exact certitude this happened because of this.
And how many of you picture him still walking around in his coat of many colors, that he didn't have it anymore?
Well, certainly not. He probably left it at Potiphar's wife's house.
No.
I know. It was stained with blood and given back to him. Yeah, I know.
Desert.
I know. All right. So, I thought, yeah, the Potiphar's wife thing is never made the flannelgram in VBS. You're right. And that one didn't make it up there. Same with the Judah and Tamar story. That one never made the flannelgram. Yeah. Which is a very interesting story. I have some notes on that, but we'll get there in a little bit. Other things that stuck out to you or that you thought were interesting.
I thought it was interesting, they talk about all of these were dreams, and again, these were stories told about all this. Why did they choose dreams? Why did they not say, God spoke to Joseph, God spoke to whatever, and totally so-and-so? Why was it a dream? What is the significance? Because it's all these dreams, what's that about?
Yeah, so in the handout, we'll talk a little bit about that. Some people, I think in the ancient Near East, in this part of the world, this is a long, long time ago, they viewed dreams as God, as like divine interaction, that God does speak through dreams. And there are still people today, right, who certainly believe that God speaks through dreams.
Indians used to go out and have visions.
Yeah, yes.
They were high, I'm sure.
Well, so you keep distracting me. Don't do that. Where was I? Yeah, so dreams as a word from God. And so they were a way that God messages to them.
Is that, looking back over the first 30-some chapters, when we talk about dreams, there too, I don't remember. Did Noah have a dream?
I'm glad you asked. Let me confirm my notes. Right? Again, this was a theme that I did not pick up on until reading Genesis for the 15th time. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's totally there. Let me find it. So Joseph interprets dreams, and there are other dreams and dreamers in the Genesis narrative. Abraham has a dream, chapter 15. Abimelech has a dream, chapter 20. Jacob has a dream, chapter 28. Laban has a dream, chapter 31. So there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 or 5 other examples of dreamers only in Genesis. And there are other dreamers in other parts of the narrative as well, notably Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes kings have dreams and visions, and they are either like foreseeing the future, or they're foreseeing God's hand enacting against them, or God providing deliverance.
Mary and Joseph, did not Joseph have
Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up. I said, are there parallels between this Joseph and the New Testament Joseph, who also dreams?
And they're both going to Egypt.
And they both go to Egypt. Right? And it's in that dream that God speaks to Joseph and says, you need to get up and flee because Herod's going to kill you all and go to Egypt.
And then that's another dream that's supposed to go home.
Yeah. And in particular, that story is found in the Gospel of Matthew. And the Gospel of Matthew is like the most, I mean this in the most non-racist way possible, but Matthew's like the most Jewish gospel out of all the Gospels. When you read it, it begins with like the lineage of David. And so like, it's trying to tell you like Jesus is the Jewiest Jew guy you know. And here's a story about Joseph. Like it's not Mary, right? Joseph gets the spotlight in Matthew. Mary gets the spotlight in Luke. So Matthew is zooming in on Joseph. And so I think that there is sort of this echo and parallel with the Joseph in the Genesis story, bridging the gap all the way to Matthew. Joseph's a dreamer. Does that sound familiar? And then every, first century Jew reading that says, oh, Joseph is a dreamer. I know Joseph the dreamer. Something to think about. Good eyes, yeah. What else? Or maybe I can work through my notes. Well, we'll see. If we finish a touch early, we finish a touch early. We probably won't, though.
No, it isn't. We didn't mention it. We're doing a recap, but Jacob adopts Joseph's two children,
Jacob adopts Joseph's two children.
and in place of Joseph, because Joseph is not coming.
Oh, Manasseh and Ephraim, thank you. At the very, very end,
Yeah.
the blessing, where Joseph also wants to bless. On the what?
He's the second son.
He's the second son.
He got blessed.
Does this sound familiar? Does this sound familiar? Right? Over and over again. Okay. All right, so the whole entire story of Joseph sort of starts with that. We can look at the text real fast. What are we in Genesis 37?
Go to many colors. Yeah. That's where Joseph, well, no. Rachel has Joseph.
Yep,
But from
yep.
the very beginning, he's the favorite child.
Yeah, so I just wanted to read the first couple verses of 37. So Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story, right? Remember? Look. The land of Canaan, that's there. And this is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, isn't this funny? This is an interesting segue. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report to their father. He was tattling. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he had him made a long robe with sleeves. I thought that was an interesting choice of phrase, right? Israel loved Joseph more than any of his children. It seems to foreshadow some trouble in the same way that Isaac loved Esau, Rebekah loved Jacob. That rhythm of language, and it sounds very familiar. I just think it's interesting. The first thing that happens to Joseph is what?
When he has the dream, he has a dream.
Okay, he has the dream,
His son, of his brothers
bowing down. Yep. And then in verse 8 it says, so they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. And I'm trying to find exactly where it says it. And of course, I don't think I wrote it down. Bow down. And they're not happy about that.
So they're going to get rid of him. They're going to kill him.
They're going to kill him.
You decide not to kill him because they decide they could sell him instead.
Yep, and if someone can find it, please find it for me. It says they conspire to kill him, I think. Do y'all remember this? I found it. This is in verse 18. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. Just asking.
Oh, when he was far away.
Okay. So, I just heard, like, a massive connection to Cain and Abel in the story. Should we go back to Genesis? The jealousy, right? Okay, certainly, right? Or it's he's a little showboaty.
Okay, so that's a good question. Okay, so why didn't Joseph just not say anything? And he says this, I mean, he's thinking they're gonna be real happy about him telling him.
He's 17. Yeah. Oh, youthful ignorance, you know. I don't know, right? He's young. You could say he's naive, and he's not thinking clearly, right?
He's wearing that coat.
And he's showing off, right?
He's wearing that coat out in the hot desert.
I mean, even his father rebuked him for saying that.
Okay.
There's gotta be a reason that that story was told like that. There's a reason it was told that story like that.
It's a setup.
Yeah, I mean, that story was told for generations. Well, why did they tell a story like that? What does that mean? Why are they setting him up for that? It's really interesting because that didn't have to happen. I mean, but that was put in there on purpose, obviously, so that it set him up for what happened later.
Yeah, in particular the dream, the idea of them bowing down, because his dream will come true, right? That they will need him and they will bow down to him.
Not knowing that he's separate.
Yeah, there's some deception there, which of course is a main theme in Genesis. There's always deception with this family. Like, no, she's not my wife. She's my sister. You know. Yeah, and of course I'm Esau, Dad. Give me your blessing. You know, and his eyes are dim and he doesn't really see. So okay, and then he gives him the blessing.
Esau had wanted that stew, and so
So
he
this-
He
kindly
gave it away.
gave her away,
So
but then he forgot about that evidently.
Yeah. And here it's more like this is going to come to pass regardless of anyone's involvement. So a little bit of a changing of the narrative and the themes.
Well, giving away his birthright, I mean, I understand that, but why did he say, wait a minute, you did this, you lied, I take it back, I'm not doing that, I'm gonna turn it over to the other guy, but he didn't do that, like, once he said it.
Yes, right? So in the ancient world, for sure, there was this idea that once you've spoken a blessing, it is done. You cannot take it back. Once the words are spoken, it is truth or it is enacted upon. You cannot redact it. There's something far more serious about a covenant, about a spoken agreement, than we have in today's world, where we'll just say, I signed under duress, or, you know, I don't love you anymore, here are the papers, or, you know, whatever. Yeah, just interesting.
But that's true today. If a leader tells you a certain story, and then you believe it, and when you find out somebody else has got a different story, you have a tendency to believe the first one,
Mm-hmm.
because you got the first story.
That's interesting. Think about when it falls and the prominence it plays in the story. All right, so I'm going to look through some of my notes, if it's okay with you all. So he...
Can you tell on that map where Gaza is?
Nope.
No, okay.
I mean, you know,
I'm
I
just-
could broadly...
I'm just being political, I just want.
Yeah, I could be like, you know, here. This area. I think it's here-ish.
I think it's southern.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Yeah, it's here-ish, I think. But honestly, this is going to sound awful, y'all. I've spent way more time looking at ancient maps than I have modern maps. So I'm far more comfortable being like, oh, I know where the Ottoman Empire is. And people go, what? There's no such thing as the Ottoman Empire.
What do you need that for?
I know. I go, well, let me tell you why it's important, okay? Archduke Ferdinand, yeah. Okay. So let me work through some of my notes if it's okay with you all real fast. So he's given this gift of a robe, and his brothers respond with sort of malice and frustration and envy. So I wrote down a simple question, what I perceive as a simple question, we can just talk about it a little bit, is what does this tell us of human nature? Hasn't changed much. Yeah, right? Again, I hear a lot of echoes to Cain and Abel. And I think that there's a massive theme in Genesis that I'll get to about alienation, or the posture of me against you, with where Genesis ends, which is reconciliation.
Well, that thing about sisters and brothers, you know, there was famous Smothers Brothers, and one of them always said to the other, mother loved you better than me. And that goes on in families,
Yeah, it does.
most families.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes on in all the patriarchal families, right? This mom loving this person or dad loving this person. Who does the blessing go to? That dynamic is a huge part of the story in Genesis. Okay, so I said Joseph interprets dreams. We talked about this. There's other dreams in the Genesis narrative. We talked about that already. And I said, are there parallels between this Joseph and the Joseph of the New Testament and going to Egypt? I think so. Okay, so I wanted to get into this. I'm going to have to read my notes, so if I get a little, bear with me. So when Joseph recognizes his brothers, this is fast forward later, right? When Joseph recognizes his brothers, how should we interpret his machinations? Right, he puts the extra money in the bags, he puts the cup in the bag. Do you view him as being ruthless,
Sneaky,
as being sneaky? Is he playing the role of the trickster? Is he
getting even.
getting even? Is he being virtuous?
Go with spies, you're spies, you have come to see where our land is unprotected.
What do you make out? How do you make this this story work in your mind? What do you think?
I think he's setting them up.
You don't think he's being virtuous?
No virtue there.
No, I mean I don't either. I think he's a scoundrel, you know, and I think that's fine. I just think it's interesting.
Trying to be nice when he's not very nice.
But there's a narrative point to it eventually,
Yes.
maybe.
He wants to get Benjamin and his father there.
He wants to get Benjamin and his father, and he views this as a way to do it.
Without revealing who he is.
Yeah, so I don't think I saw this the first 8 times I've read Genesis, but I found it this time. Benjamin is his only full brother. All the other brothers are his half-brother, right? And I think I had sort of forgotten that his dad thinks he's dead.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, I knew that. I knew his dad thought he was dead. He gets the coat. It's got the blood on it. Oh, my son, he's dead. But then, like, I think I just forgot. Like, my brain just disconnected. And then you go on and read the story. Because we know he's alive. We know he's alive. He's not dead. But then I put myself back in his shoes. And I'm like, no, his dad thinks he's dead.
His dad says he is no more. His brothers say
Yeah.
he is no more.
So let me see if I can read this to you, and you can follow this a little bit. These are some notes I got. I got it from actually the study Bible here and some commentaries. I thought this was really interesting. So here's a clever thing in the story of Joseph. Joseph is sold into slavery, and the function of the silver and the packs, and how Jacob suspects that they probably mean to harm Benjamin. Benjamin is Joseph's only full brother from the shared mother of Rachel. Joseph will put his brothers in a position to betray Benjamin, right? And then it's Judah who offers himself up in exchange for Benjamin. Judah is his half-brother, Benjamin is Joseph's full brother, and all of this is really initiated by Judah. Judah is the one who formally sells Joseph into slavery.
But it was better than killing him.
Yes, it's better than killing him, but this is all Judah's fault. And here, Judah becomes like a main character on the back half of the story. It's almost like Joseph is saying, like, are you going to do it again? Are you gonna mess this up again with the only real brother I have? How are you going to be like a brother to me? And then Judah has to do the main interaction with him in Egypt. And then I ask this question to myself, and I'll ask it to you all, is do you see the telling of the story from Cain and Abel to kind of full reunion of brothers? I just found this fascinating that, you know, you have Adam and Eve, and the first narrative directly after that is like 2 brothers. And one of them, they basically kill each other over envy. And then you fast forward all the way to the end of Genesis. 12 brothers. And they're envious, and they want to kill them. And they sell them to slavery. And then what's going to happen? We know what happened with Jacob and Esau, right? They reunited. Like, it's this ongoing story again and again. And here it is in this story that Judah, again, which will be the lineage of Jesus, reunites with his brother here at the end of Genesis. So I just thought that was profound. I don't know how else to describe it. I probably need to type it up in better words than my bullet points. But what do you make of that? Do you see that as well, or am I just reading between the lines too much?
For the fact that Joseph becomes teary-eyed and cries about it, I think he's definitely torn between joy and I don't know, adversity or something.
His tears are sincere.
I think his tears are sincere.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think I'd fully understood how Benjamin, right, he's his brother, how he played a role in the story until this time around. That I think Joseph is like testing his brothers to be like, are you gonna sell him too? Are you gonna pawn him off and tell Dad that he's dead? And then I just think it's Judah almost redeems himself, to use New Testament language.
I didn't read that at all.
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
That's fair. That was my take on it this go round.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You're the pastor.
No, that's okay. I've been wrong a few times. It's just something that I saw, something that I thought was interesting.
I just thought that he wanted them to bring Benjamin and his father up because he wanted to see them. And I didn't read anywhere in that he was worried that they would hurt Benjamin. I think he was worried that their father would not let them bring Benjamin because they had lost Joseph.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I don't know.
Or maybe I'm not.
I don't know.
It's a good story.
So I want to ask a question about, and then we'll get into the last couple questions I have, some group discussion. This Judah and Tamar story,
I love that.
chapter 38. I won't read it because it's R-rated, and we're on YouTube.
It's not that bad.
Well, it's
It's no worse than someone taking somebody else's wife.
well, no, you're right, but it's kind of spicy, right? The story here. How would you summarize the story? Someone else say it other than me. I'm just curious. How would you summarize the story? Those of you that read. Who are the players?
Judah and his 3 sons and Tamar or Tamar.
Yep. And what's the issue?
A baby.
Husband
A boy.
passed
Ye-
away without
Yep.
a child, and
Yeah.
so then the second son,
Needs to do his duty and provide an heir.
He
he
refuses.
didn't do that.
Yeah, and he didn't.
And so then God took him out,
Yep.
and then Judah said that he would, for her to go back to her father until the youngest son was of age or,
Yeah, till he's older.
yeah. And so then she got tired of waiting and dressed herself as a prostitute.
Yeah.
Judas plays with her.
Yes.
And then
He commits adultery. Yeah.
She
Well
gets-
done.
she gets
Thank
his-
you.
She gets his staff and his
Or, yeah.
ring or something
Seal.
in, because he can't pay her something. There's some- Now, he promises her something, but a goat.
Yeah. So
You don't just go to town with a goat under your arm. So,
sure you can. Sure you can. Why not? Right?
why is that so bad?
Y'all, I remember sitting, this was in 2013 at Fuller. I was sitting there with Dr. Dearman, and I read this story, and I was just like, is this okay? Is this like, he sleeps with the prostitute, and it's like, my bad. Here's a rod, I know, right? It's just
But
this,
she's a widow.
it's this really, disturbing story. So,
Just gets even with it.
well, okay, so let's say a couple things about the story, because I don't want to just glaze over it. One, I think it's in the story in this particular spot, because it's in chronological order. If you read 37 and go to 39, the story makes perfect sense. So it interrupts the narrative, and you have to ask the question, and it has nothing to do with Joseph, my opinion, right? So why is it here? I think a lot of people will say it's here because it's chronological. It happened at this time. And so the author of Genesis puts it in here because it's a true story that happened in the lineage of these people, and they want to preserve the true story, right? So they put it in here. I know, yeah, something we'd rather whitewash or,
Can't just say
you know, move to
Joe.
the end, the appendix. You know, Grandpa, yeah, moving on. Yeah, so it's there because it's probably chronologically when it happened. It's also very particular to the lineage of Judah.
Right.
And I remember getting into some strange theological discussions about the gentleman in the story who spills his seed on the ground and is therefore killed for it. You know, and you're like, is this like, what's going on here? And then some mentors, you know, very wise, said, well, who's the guy who's like, what's the lineage sort of all about? It's like, well, it's about Judah's line, you know, in this whole entire issue. And who comes from Judah's line?
Perez.
Well, you go all the way down. Ultimately, Christ.
Right. Yeah.
And so if the plan ultimately is for the line from the tribe of Judah to come and redeem Israel, you don't mess with that lineage.
No.
Go in and do your job, man. And so there's a reason why the outcome is significant, because the consequences are high, because the prophecy is that this is the tribe that will end up redeeming all of Israel, for what it's worth.
That's a
Never
great
thought
story.
about that, but
Yeah. So that's why it's a significant story.
That's it. One reason for including,
Oh, yeah.
you have to get from, what's his first name, Adam, to Jesus.
Yes. They're all the way. Okay. Very good. So if any other thoughts? If not, we'll go to my 3 questions and we'll wrap up. It'll be good. So I'm going to put you on the spot, right? Like I said, I got my mic here. I'm going to pass it around just so people online can hear you. No one can see your face. Don't worry. They're just going to hear a disembodied voice. I'll prove it to you. Look, haha, disembodied voice. Okay. It'll be very simple. So if we were sitting at a bar, if we were at Starbucks, if we were at Fresh Pot, somewhere of this conversation, and someone said, okay, so I read the book of Genesis. I don't understand it. What's it all about? How would you, at a glance, summarize it? What's your 1-minute take? Remember, you're at a bar. They're going to get really bored if you go for 5 minutes. So, it's like, you got to be pithy and tight, and you got to summarize. What would you say? How would you summarize Genesis in like a minute-ish? Do your best. I'm not sure I could. Well, it's okay. It's a group exercise.
I can do it in about 3 words.
Let's hear it. All right, grab this. Go for it. How would you summarize Genesis? What's Genesis about? You got like 1 minute, and I'm going to interrupt you. And go ahead. You got 1 minute. Go.
The family of God, from Adam through Noah, Moses, all the patriarchs.
Moses is not in Genesis.
I'm sorry.
You okay? Abraham?
No, Noah.
Noah. Okay, keep going. Keep going. The family of God. You said,
Moses,
yeah, that's okay. You said Noah, Abraham.
yeah, and the patriarchs.
Okay.
And it's their story. It's the story that gets you through all of the first book of the Bible to lead you to the next book of the Bible.
Nice.
Somebody else.
That's 45 seconds. That was pretty good. Others want to take a shot at it? How would you add? What would you change?
Barbara, Janet, somebody else.
Disembodied voice for the.
Kathy.
Not an easy question. All right, you got 50 chapters. Yeah, give it a shot. What would you say? Okay, so I'll ask you the question. How would you summarize Genesis? What's this whole entire book of the Bible about?
Well, I think we think of Genesis as the beginning of humankind, but more than that, I think it became about how people were chosen by God to carry out His will, and how that line progressed through several generations to become the Jewish people.
That was like
Very,
20 seconds. That was very good.
very good.
That was good. Good.
That's what it,
Yeah.
We're gonna go on stage with this, okay?
Other thoughts? What would you think? How would you summarize it? Would you want to take another shot at it? We'll do one more. We got one more? Disembodied voice. The camera's, this is all blocked out by the screen. I'm going to cut you off in 1 minute.
Genesis is the story of the Jewish people. The story the Jewish people told by them over the generations on how the world began, how they began, how their faith began, how their people began, starting from the creation and going through Joseph. So it's their history, the history of the Jews, and how they came upon the earth, and their story from the beginning.
Like 30 seconds. That's great. That's good. All right. This is an interesting exercise, you know. I think it's interesting to take sort of the Bible out of the Bible study into the world. Like, I just wonder if you'll be afforded the opportunity sometime in the next few weeks for someone to be like, for you to say, I just finished reading Genesis. It was a really interesting book of the Bible.
So I gotta go to a bar first.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, come on with me. We'll go together. We'll go together, right? Spread the word. Spread the word, baby. It's good. All right. And we've already done this a little bit in some of our summary, but this question is what do people think this story, Genesis, is about? And then I said, but what is the story about? So are there differences, you think, between like our presuppositions that we think it's about this, but then you read it and it's about something different? Or maybe there are some similarities. So what do you think?
I think most people associate Genesis with creation. Period.
Yes.
End of story.
Yes.
And there's much more to it than that. I don't think, well, I myself probably didn't even realize all that was in it, in the story.
Yeah.
Besides the creation, I mean, everybody knows the creation is
Yeah.
there.
Yes. It's interesting, like, it's 2 chapters. And there's 48 other chapters of stuff, you know? But we go, oh, Genesis, you mean the Scopes trial with the monkey, you know? And you go, actually, there's 48 other chapters we're not talking about. So thank you. Yeah, I think it's a huge thought. Most people associate Genesis with creation. What else? And maybe that's it, but I'm just curious. What do you think people think the story is about versus what is the story about?
I think there's still the confusion of, a lot of people that know enough about it may be like that all of the polygamy, how did you get, how is that okay? And I think I'm still struggling with that even.
Yeah.
As going through the study of how did we go from polygamy to monogamy and, or monogamy to polygamy to monogamy.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a hard thing that a lot of people, it's that kind of a topic throughout the Bible that is contradictory and we don't know why that causes people to not want to, fully believe
Yeah.
and fully follow.
Yeah, it can be a stumbling block for some people, right? Very good.
But it's only about us. It's only about the Jews and Christians. I look at the question, do Muslims believe in Genesis?
Yes. Up to Ishmael.
Yeah, I mean, do they buy into Adam and Eve in the beginning of this, just like, because that's the beginning for them too?
Yeah, so Genesis plays an important role in the Islamic faith, certainly, and especially up to the role of the model of Ishmael. And Ishmael, right, is the one who travels to, oh my gosh, Medina, Mecca.
Mecca.
And he's the one who discovers the black box, that thing, shrine, you know what I'm talking about? That's the one they pilgrimage around. And it's his journey, you hear the word journey, right? So the pilgrimage is one of the 5 pillars of faith of Islam. And it's because of Ishmael's journey. And they root that to Genesis. And so there are a number of things that the Abrahamic faiths pull from, and they pull it from the Genesis narrative. So I think it would be central. I'm not sure it's as central maybe as that word would connotate. Is that fair?
I put the Adam and Eve story and Cain and Abel story, is that part of their?
To my understanding, yes. But it's been a while since I've read the Quran, and it's been a while since I've directly asked someone who's a devout Muslim that question. But it's a good question. I know that they believe in Noah, in the way that we believe in Noah. I think the stories are, I don't want to say identical. You know what I mean? Because even our telling of Noah here, if I, said, tell me the story of Noah, and you tell me the story of Noah. You probably tell different stories, but they're the same story. So I think that to the Muslim faith, Genesis is the same story. It's not like all the characters have different names.
No, it is a story for the Jews and the Christians. It's
Yes.
not a story for the Hindus or the
Yes.
Confucius people.
Yes.
You know, all these different people around the world, they don't buy into it. They don't know who
Yeah, there are some interesting parallels between themes and stories within Genesis and extra biblical themes and narratives outside of it that are really outside of the scope of our particular study on Genesis. Like you have the Enum Elish, is that right? I'm shooting from somewhere in the back of my brain here. The Gilgamesh epic, which is a story of a worldwide flood of the Babylonian account, and that's an Eastern telling of a story that we hear from the Noah account. So there are other similar themes of cosmic origin, of a divine being, of interacting with humans, sometimes for different reasons.
Well, I think, don't most faiths believe in a supreme being of
Yeah,
some kind, a
yeah.
great spirit, whatever it happens to be, some Buddha, whatever, you know, is there not a main guy at the head of most of these faiths?
Allah.
Yes, I think so. You could say that most believe in a divine other. And I think most would say that a divine other has created things. That'd probably be as far as I would go with it.
Why do you think the Muslims planted their temple right on top of where ours would be?
Probably because politics. I don't know. Yeah,
Let's block these folks out.
that's right. They vote differently than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. My children go to different schools. Okay. Okay, so what else? What do people think the story is about, and what is the story about? I think we've identified some misconceptions. Some people think it's primarily about,
Jewish.
creation. And then here there's 40 other chapters that talk about other themes. Or some people say it's, it's only a Jewish story, and we've already identified that. Actually, no, this story is at least two other major faiths. So I think it's important to recognize as well that Genesis is equally as important, I'll say it for all of us, that Genesis is equally as important to Christians as it is to Jews and Muslims.
There's one for them, one yes.
Yeah?
You don't wanna get out of this story. Like my grandma said, there's no new sin.
There's no new sin. Okay, so that takes me to the last question, is what does it teach us about God, and what does it teach us about ourselves? So we could go with what your grandmother said, right? Thinking about humans, there ain't nothing new under the sun,
But God is forgiving.
Okay, so we recognize, too, in the Genesis narrative that God is forgiving. And isn't that interesting? Because that could go back to the other question. I like this Jesus person. Jesus is very forgiving, but this Old Testament God smiting and killing everybody, and we can say, well, there certainly is sanctioned killing in the Old Testament, but this God also does seem to be forgiving in the story of Genesis, and that's fascinating. That's sort of the first book of the Bible, and there's a characteristic of this God that this God is forgiving.
God is ever faithful,
Okay, God is ever faithful.
ever merciful,
Yeah.
ever forgiving, somebody else said. But we have to respond to that. It's our duty to respond.
It is. Okay.
Which these people did.
Mm-hmm. So God doesn't force them. Isn't that interesting? God doesn't go to Abraham. Now, let's be clear with our language here. God chooses Abraham, and God covenants with Abraham. He encourages him. Like, could Abraham had said no?
It would have been a different story.
It would have been a different story. And that's really not the point of the story. The point of the story is Abraham says yes. And so therefore, covenant is made. But God doesn't just say, I don't care. You are going to be chosen whether you like it or not.
Do you think that, I should say do you, but I think that when
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. A covenant of sorts.
Yeah. If you do this, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You will be my people, I will be your God.
very good. Okay, what else? When we're running out of time. What does it teach us about God? What does it teach us about ourselves?
So we're not to the core.
Yeah, back to this, right? There's nothing, no new sin
sin.
under the sun. Humans have not changed a whole lot.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's a really beautiful thing to mention about the story of Genesis, right? A lot of people will approach this Bible, maybe not you all, because you all are well seasoned, but a lot of new Christians will approach this and they'll say, oh, all these people, they must have been such good people. And they read the story and they go, oh my God, they did what? Right? And you go, yeah, God uses just about everybody, no matter how messed up you are, no matter what family you come from, who your mom's cousin, brother's uncle is, it doesn't matter. God uses everybody. And I think that's an important thing to recognize about the text, that it tells us that.
When it's a group of us talking, too long ago about what's happening right now in Israel, where's God?
Okay, yeah.
Well,
Maybe a good question this summer we'll explore is, where is God in the midst of hurting and suffering?
we had this discussion, we have a prayer group at GBS praying particularly for Israel. And one of the guys said, Israel will survive, period.
Yeah,
And I think he's right,
yeah,
period.
yep. There's a covenant there. The same way that the church will survive, no matter what. No matter what politics get mixed in or who does what. Jesus says, Peter, on you I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So let's end with that question real fast, actually. Is in the Genesis narrative, right, bad things happen to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to Joseph. And let's zoom in on Joseph and end with this question, is where is God when all the bad things happen to Joseph? He's sold into slavery, he's thrown in prison, there's a famine in the land. Where is God in the story?
He's taking his time.
He gives them the ability to interpret dreams,
Okay,
but God is there.
all right. Never in the story does it say, and God decided to move out of the solar system and say, screw all of you people, I'm going home. That's not a part of the story. God is still there. And it's,
That's what people ask all the time,
yeah,
when things, where is God in all this, and how come it happened to him, he was such a good person, I know a person who could have been zapped and I've been happy.
yeah,
So, we ask that to ourselves,
yeah.
that hasn't changed.
God is there. And it becomes our job as the church, right, to find it and to bear witness to it and to point to it in our actions. Yeah. Amen. All right. So that's Genesis, all 50 chapters as best we can. Yeah, I would encourage you, right, to revisit it in parts and parcel and little chunks and read bits and pieces as you encounter it again.
Well, as we said in our Sunday school class, that you can read it, and every time you read it, you get a different meaning. or
Yeah.
something that you missed the first time around, second time around.
Yeah.
And then you think also, like Peg says, that it's happening now. I mean, when you get into this Old Testament stuff, you read on through the prophets and all the kings and chronicles and stuff, it just happens over and over and
It
over.
does.
And it's still happening,
It does. Yeah.
and God is still faithful.
Yeah, I think if I was to preach this, you'd probably hear the words that, the truth of Genesis is not that it happened, but that it happens, right? The story is that it's our story. It's our story. And we identify so clearly with the story of Genesis. I'm going to offer a word of prayer, and then we'll linger for a little bit, or I'll linger. You can go home. If you got questions, I'll hang out. So, gracious God, thank you for not forsaking us, for being there even when bad things happen, for sticking with us when we turn away and when we fail, and we fall short. It's your love that remains steadfast. So bring us rest this evening. Let us continue to reflect on the stories that we find in Genesis and what it means for our lives today. We We pray this all in your son's name. Amen. Thank you, friends.